Breanna Micciolo, Corey's devoted mother, sensed something was wrong immediately the moment Christopher Gregor came into their lives. Every time her son went over to his father's house, Corey came back with bruises all over his body. As Breanna documented the marks on her son with each passing day, her pleas were ignored until it was too late.
Micchiolo called Child Protective Services 100 times. 100 times. Because her little boy kept coming home bruised and beaten when he visited his dad's. 100 times. And then there was this one last time, and it was a biggie. It was an emergency order seeking full custody. Emergency to the Department of Child Protection in New Jersey. Emergency. He can't go to his dad's tomorrow at 9 a.m. It can't go on. It can't. And the judge said, no. And so Bree loaded that little boy into the car, and she took that little boy to his dad's. And 9 hours later, that little boy, Corey Micchiolo, was dead.
Corey Micchiolo was born on May 1st, 2014, to his mother Breanna Micciolo. At just 17 years old and still a high school junior, Breanna took on the challenges of single parenthood, raising Corey on her own in his early years. Corey was described as a carefree, cheeky child who loved painting, drawing, and reading.
What is the fifth planet from the sun? It is big. It is made of gas. It is Jupiter.
The bond between Corey and Breanna was undeniably strong, despite the struggles they faced.
So guys, this is my mommy, and your...
As Breanna entered her early 20s, she began to struggle with drug dependency. She maintained, however, that she never used drugs when around Corey, and there was no evidence that Corey was neglected while in her care. By the time Corey was 4, they were living in a 2-story townhouse with Breanna's mother, her mother's boyfriend, and her sister, as money was tight. In 2019, Breanna's mother encouraged her to seek child support by getting a paternity test for Corey's father, but Breanna was hesitant. Instead, Breanna applied for food stamps and health insurance. Unfortunately, the application process still required a paternity test, leaving Breanna with no other choice but to move forward with it. Corey's father ended up being a man called Christopher Gregor. Back in 2013, when Christopher was 21 years old, he assaulted 16-year-old Breanna, which led to her becoming pregnant with Corey. Once Christopher discovered he had a son, he and his family immediately began fighting for visitation rights. On paper, Christopher looked like an ideal candidate for custody. He had been a former high school football star at Monroe Township High School, an honors student, and a youth mentor in the district's Heroes and Cool Kids program, which selected high school students as role models to mentor middle schoolers. Christopher also held both an undergraduate and master's degree, and he had a steady job as a realtor. These factors worked in his favor when it came to custody decisions, especially when weighed against Breanna's struggles with substance abuse. Quickly, Breanna lost custody of 5-year-old Corey due to her drug issues, and Corey went to live full-time with Christopher, despite having only met his biological father a few months prior. Determined to regain custody, Breanna entered a drug rehabilitation program to get clean. During this time, Christopher moved out of his parents' house into an apartment complex called Atlantic Heights in New Jersey. Over the next few months, Breanna demonstrated that she was sober, regularly passed drug tests, and showed commitment to her recovery. The courts eventually awarded joint legal custody, allowing Corey to stay with Christopher most of the time, but giving Breanna every other weekend with her son. The court also mandated that Christopher and Breanna unblock each other's phone numbers to communicate effectively and required both parents to attend co-parenting counseling sessions. However, Breanna remained deeply concerned about Corey spending so much time with Christopher. She knew that Christopher was not the good person he appeared to be on paper, and her fears for Corey's safety grew even more intense when, after Corey's third visit with his father in September 2019, she noticed visible injuries on her son's face. Following the first signs of abuse in September 2019, Breanna started documenting every injury Corey sustained. Just a few weeks later, in October 2019, Corey came home with a split lip and a swollen face. When Breanna asked him what had happened, Corey refused to speak. When she confronted Christopher, he brushed it off as an accident while playing soccer outside. Breanna's instincts told her something was wrong, so she took photos of Corey's injuries and submitted her concerns to the Division of Child Protection and Permanency, DCPP. As months passed, Breanna continued to document every incident, sending photos and detailed reports to DCPP. Despite her growing alarm, each of her reports seemed to fall on deaf ears. Breanna estimated that over the course of 18 months, she made more than 100 calls to DCPP and filed 7 formal complaints, all alleging that Christopher was abusing their son. Breanna said, "They made it seem to be I was bothering them." In April 2020, she sent yet another letter to DCPP, pleading for someone to take her concerns seriously. But despite her relentless efforts, nothing was done. She wrote, "I talked to someone on Friday about my son being abused, and no one continuing to investigate it. He's got abused once again, and I found out about it yesterday. Many reports are made, and nothing has been done. It's a bruise very similar to the one made in December by his father. My family documented the bruise, and my son saying he was hit at his father's household. We fear that he needs medical attention, because I was told he seemed like he was in pain and had trouble doing anything like running or moving too much. Is someone going to do something about this abuse, or are we going to allow his father to continue to hurt him? I have pictures of injuries that began in September, which is when his father came into life. Please get back to me. Thank you." In July 2020, Breanna sent another desperate email to DCPP, this time detailing Corey's injuries and providing photographs that showed bruises, scrapes, black eyes, and what appeared to be a bite mark on her son. Finally, DCPP took action by sending caseworkers to interview Corey. However, these interviews were always conducted at Christopher's house, with Christopher present. Breanna repeatedly urged the caseworkers to speak with Corey away from his father, as she believed he was too afraid to tell the truth in Christopher's presence. But her pleas were ignored and no further action was taken. Months of abuse passed, and on March 23, 2021, she immediately noticed new injuries on his face. When she questioned him, Corey quietly told her that Christopher had forced him to run on a treadmill as punishment, calling him fat. On Saturday, March 20th, 2021, it was Breanna's day to have Corey. The two spent the day in Pennsylvania celebrating Breanna's dad's birthday. It was a fun-filled day, and they enjoyed their time together as a family. However, as they headed back to New Jersey, Breanna got stuck in heavy traffic, making her late for the court-ordered drop-off time between 2 and 3 p.m. At 3:04 p.m., she texted Christopher to let him know about the traffic delay, explaining that she was still on her way and would arrive soon. Breanna, aware of Christopher's temper and fearful of how he might react, hoped he would be understanding, given the circumstances. But this slight delay would soon escalate the situation beyond her worst fears. Christopher was not happy and texted back, "FYI, this is beyond pissing me off. Now my entire plans for today are ruined." When Breanna finally arrived at Christopher's residence, he instructed her to drop Corey off at the apartment complex's gym. Just after 4 p.m., Corey was seen entering the gym with his father. CCTV footage captured the tragic events that followed. At 4:18 p.m., Corey started running on the treadmill while Christopher worked out nearby. Less than 10 minutes later, at 4:27 p.m., Christopher approached the treadmill and increased the speed. For 6-year-old Corey, the pace was too fast, and he soon fell off the back of the treadmill. Instead of stopping, Christopher picked Corey up by his shirt and forced him back onto the moving treadmill. Corey struggled to regain his footing, while Christopher could be seen biting the top of his head. Despite Corey's clear distress, Christopher made him continue running. Corey fell off 4 more times, each time trying to get back on the treadmill, while Christopher stood by. Eventually, the treadmill was stopped, and both Corey and Christopher left the gym. I warn you, the footage is truly horrifying. A few days later, on March 23rd, 2021, it was Breanna's turn to pick up Corey, and she immediately noticed fresh injuries on Corey's face and a scrape on his chest, adding to her growing fears for her son's safety. Despite Breanna's relentless efforts to protect her son Corey, her pleas were repeatedly dismissed by the legal system. After witnessing the horrifying Treadmill Incident on March 20th, 2021, and seeing fresh injuries on her son just days later, she took her concerns once again to the Division of Child Protection and Permanency. She texted the caseworker, "Since I'm in the area, I'd like to meet with you if possible for an interview, or if need be, I'll drive back to my house." She received no response, so 6 days later, on the 31st of March 2021, she texted the caseworker again to provide him with a specific time frame for the Treadmill Incident. She wrote, "It's Breanna. I just wanted to let you know the incident took place Saturday, March 20th, around 4:05 p.m, to be more precise." Determined to act, Breanna filed an order to show cause on March 31st, 2021, seeking emergency custody of Corey while the abuse claims were investigated. Tragically, the court rejected her request, citing a lack of imminent or irreparable harm in the judge's decision. Despite her documentation of Corey's injuries, including bruises, cuts, and visible signs of fear, the judge ruled against modifying custody arrangements, relying on advice from DCPP. Incredibly, DCPP knew about the Treadmill Incident, and at least one caseworker had viewed the video, which he said showed Corey falling 6 times and had seen Corey's injuries, but they still advised the judge against it. On the 1st of April 2021, Breanna took Corey to see a pediatrician at the suggestion of a DCPP caseworker. There, Corey told the pediatrician about the incident involving the treadmill. After evaluating him, the pediatrician recommended that Corey should go to a medical center for some further testing. By 7 p.m, Breanna arrived at the community medical center, but time was slipping away as the custody agreement required Corey to be dropped off at Christopher's by 7:30 p.m. Christopher grew increasingly angry, repeatedly calling Breanna to demand that she bring Corey to him. However, Breanna stood firm, insisting that her son needed medical attention. At the community medical center, Breanna was advised to take Corey to Jersey Shore University Medical Center, where a pediatric abuse specialist was available. As further tests were conducted on Corey, Christopher's angry calls continued, demanding that Breanna bring Corey to him immediately, but Breanna refused, saying that they had to wait until Corey was discharged. Corey told the doctor that some of the bruises were the result of him falling on the treadmill, and others were from playing on turf. His doctor wrote that Corey became tearful when he asked further about the treadmill incident and begged the doctor, "Promise not to tell anyone what I said." By the time all tests were completed, it was just after midnight on April 2nd, 2021. Despite Corey's body being marked with bruises, the X-rays showed no signs of fractures, and his blood work came back within normal range. Corey was discharged in the early hours of the morning. Unable to reach Christopher at that hour, Breanna took Corey back to her home for the night. On the morning of April 2nd, 2021, at 9 a.m, Breanna dropped Corey off at Christopher's house, as per the court's custody order. Christopher was furious, still upset that Breanna had brought Corey home 14 hours late. A few hours later, around 3:30 p.m, Breanna received a call from Christopher. He informed her that Corey was puking and lethargic. He demanded Corey's medical card information, but refused to tell Breanna which hospital he was taking their son to. A haunting video later surfaced, capturing the heartbreaking moment Christopher carried his son's limp body into Southern Ocean Medical Center. Corey was barely moving, lifeless in his father's arms. At the front desk, Christopher coldly reported that Corey had woken up from a nap, stumbling, slurring his words, and experiencing shortness of breath. Lindsay Carnival, a nurse at the hospital, recalled how Christopher seemed indifferent, simply dropping Corey off and walking out without a word of concern. William Doyle, a registered nurse on duty, described the scene as dire. Corey was taking end-of-life breaths, struggling for air. His head hung backward and he was unable to speak. Doyle described it as an all-hands-on-deck situation, with the medical team rushing to save the little boy, whose life was slipping away. When Corey was taken for a CT scan, he began having seizures and ultimately went into cardiac arrest. As the medical team fought desperately to revive him, Christopher coldly left the room, walking away while his son's life hung in the balance. Despite their tireless efforts, 6-year-old Corey tragically passed away, surrounded only by the medical staff who had done everything they could to save him. "We were the only ones with him," recalled a nurse, highlighting the gut-wrenching reality that Corey spent his final moments in the care of strangers, not the father who should have protected him. Corey died just a little more than an hour after being brought into the emergency room at Southern Ocean Medical Center. His initial autopsy stated that Corey had succumbed to blunt force injuries, with cardiac and liver contusions, acute inflammation, and sepsis. While Breanna's world shattered upon hearing the news of her son's death, Christopher's reaction was disturbingly detached. Within 20 minutes of Corey's death, Christopher fled, driving through the night and ending up near the Texas-Arkansas state line. His parents eventually convinced him to turn around and come home. Even then, his behavior remained erratic. He checked out of the Tennessee hotel he had informed law enforcement he would be staying at, slipping away without notifying anyone. Christopher Gregor was initially arrested for endangering the welfare of a child on July 7, 2021, following the horrific Treadmill Incident that had already raised serious concerns about his treatment of Corey. However, he was subsequently released due to New Jersey's bail reform laws. Dr. Dante Ragusa, who performed the initial autopsy, determined the cause of death to be blunt force injuries accompanied by cardiac and liver contusions, as well as acute inflammation and sepsis. However, he left the manner of death classified as undetermined. In September 2021, a consulting forensic pathologist, Dr. Thomas Andrew, reviewed Corey's case and concluded that the manner of death should be classified as homicide. His findings indicated that Corey had likely sustained an acute traumatic injury to the heart just 4 to 12 hours before his tragic death. Dr. Andrews' examination revealed disturbing evidence of chronic abuse, including multiple blunt impact injuries to Corey's chest and abdomen, a lacerated heart, and a left pulmonary contusion, alongside the laceration and contusion of the liver. On March 3, 2022, a significant breakthrough in the case came when the Ocean County Prosecutor's Office received the report from the forensic pathologist, indicating that Corey died as a result of blunt force impact to his chest and abdomen, and that the manner of Corey's death was a homicide. This revelation was pivotal, as it aligned with the ongoing investigation conducted by the Ocean County Prosecutor's Office Major Crime Unit, the Barnegat Township Police Department, and the Ocean County Sheriff's Office Crime Scene Investigation Unit. The extensive investigation revealed that Corey had been in the custody of Christopher Gregor at the time he sustained the injuries that ultimately led to his untimely death. Consequently, on March 9, 2022, Christopher Gregor was arrested for Corey's murder, facing grave charges of first-degree murder. He was held without bond at the Ocean County Jail. Christopher Gregor entered a plea of not guilty, and the trial commenced on April 30, 2024. During the opening statement, the prosecution outlined their case, asserting that they would present compelling evidence demonstrating that Corey had been murdered by his father. They emphasized that Corey had died as a direct result of the physical abuse he sustained while under Christopher's sole care after Breanna dropped him off on April 2nd, 2021.
Now, what you won't hear is that Corey was struck with a bat, stomped on by the defendant. You're not going to hear that. Because the only people there in that apartment were the defendant and Corey. But what you will hear is that the only people that were in that apartment were the defendant and Corey. And that the serious bodily injury that Corey sustained while with the defendant, and only the defendant, were so catastrophic that they ended his life.
As the trial unfolded, key testimonies were presented to support the prosecution's claims. Dr. Thomas Andrew, the consulting forensic pathologist who determined Corey's death to be a homicide, took the stand. He testified that Corey died as a result of blunt force injuries to his chest, along with significant lacerations to both his heart and liver. Dr. Andrew linked these injuries to a disturbing pattern of physical abuse, painting a harrowing picture of the circumstances surrounding Corey's last moments.
Corey's manner of death is homicide. While there are many causes of death, typically in forensic pathology, there are only 5 manners of death. And manner of death is simply a one-word description to explain how a death came about. And those 5 are natural, accident, suicide, homicide, or in rare instances, undetermined. In Corey's case, in that these injuries could not have been inflicted by himself with any kind of intent, it's certainly not suicide. These injuries, given their pattern and distribution, are consistent with having been inflicted by another person. Therefore, any death that is related to the actions of another person is, from a medical examiner standpoint, from an epidemiological or public health standpoint, homicide. Now, it doesn't have any legal significance, but that's the way that a medical examiner certifies it. So Corey's death was at the hands of another person, therefore it is a homicide.
The prosecution further brought up the Treadmill Incident from March 20th, 2021, showcasing the horrific video evidence captured by surveillance cameras. Assistant Ocean County Prosecutor Christine Lento said, "This treadmill video, which was recovered by the prosecutor's office, speaks for itself. Everything that you need and want to know is captured on this video." Christine Lento presented a powerful argument, asserting that while the treadmill incident was horrific, it was not the sole cause of Corey's death. Instead, she emphasized that Christopher's ongoing cycle of abuse was ultimately responsible for the tragic outcome. Christine Lento explained that on the day of Corey's death, Christopher had inflicted blunt force injuries on his son as punishment for Breanna being 14 hours late in returning Corey to him. William Doyle, the nurse who witnessed Corey's arrival at the Southern Ocean Medical Center, also took the stand. He recounted the chilling moment Christopher brought Corey into the emergency room, describing the child as appearing lethargic and in distress. Doyle noted that Christopher exhibited a clinical demeanor, showing no signs of concern or upset for his son's condition. Adding to the mounting evidence against Christopher, Corey's first grade teacher provided critical testimony about her observations of the child during his time in school. She revealed that she had noticed bruises on Corey's body, which raised alarms about his well-being.
Do you recall seeing the mark on his forehead, the abrasion, on March 19th before the weekend on Corey?
No.
The first time you saw it was when you returned on the 23rd.
Exactly.
She described a significant change in Corey's demeanor, indicating that he was not his usual self and suggesting that something troubling was happening outside the classroom.
When you saw the injury to Corey, did you try to talk to Corey about what had happened to him?
I did.
What was Corey's demeanor during the conversation that you had with him?
Just kind of like quiet, would just answer one word question, answer with one word.
Was that different than his normal demeanor?
Yeah, because he was able to like have a back and forth conversation and it would flow. But this was kind of just like one word answers.
During the trial, Sergeant Raymond Coles was recalled to the stand to provide critical testimony regarding Christopher's actions following Corey's tragic death. Coles revealed that Christopher's phone had been tracked moving away from the hospital for 24 hours after bringing Corey in, during which time there were no attempts to return. The phone was also reportedly placed into airplane mode, raising suspicions about Christopher's intentions. Coles delved deeper into Christopher's behavior by presenting evidence from his phone search history. In the months leading up to and following Corey's death, Christopher had conducted searches for phrases such as, "Will red marks turn into bruises? Can your phone be tracked in airplane mode? And can my car be tracked?"
A search conducted on March 25th, 2021 at 9:36:31 p.m. The body of the search states, "Will red marks turn into bruises?" The next entry is April 2nd, 2021 at 6:10:22 p.m. The search was, can your phone be tracked in airplane mode?
The next one.
The next search was for April 2nd, 2021 at 6:10:35 p.m. for, can my car be tracked? Next search was on April 4th, 2021 at 9:58:03 a.m. The search was, there was a murder determined from an autopsy. How long to file charges?
Is there another one?
The last one is on April 4th, 2021 at 10:21:16 a.m. The search was, how long after an autopsy to file charges get filed?
Additionally, Sergeant Matthew Scuti, another investigator on the case, testified about his visit to Christopher's home, where he noted a strong smell of cleaned or dried vomit emanating from Corey's bedroom.
So S71 was the bed in the rear bedroom, which was the child's bedroom. This is showing the bed in the condition that we found it. This was not searched or altered before we were in there. And it shows the pillow and blankets on top, as well as the magazine rack and the end table next to the bed.
Is this exactly how that room appeared when police responded to the apartment?
Upon our entry, that is how the bed.
And is this the room that you described the stronger smell of vomit coming from?
Yes.
Dr. Ye Kiao Ung, the physician who evaluated Corey the night before his death, also took the stand. He confirmed that Corey had been in good health when he was discharged from Jersey Shore University Medical Center just after midnight on April 2nd. Dr. Ung noted that despite some bruises and scratches of varying ages, Corey showed no signs of infection or sepsis at the time. He maintained that the decision to discharge Corey, with instructions to follow up with a child abuse specialist, was appropriate, emphasizing that all blood work and diagnostic tests had returned within normal ranges. Prosecutors also pointed to Christopher's actions following Corey's death as evidence of his culpability. They suggested that his decision to leave the area and drive through the night indicated a desire to flee from the consequences of his actions, rather than a natural response to grief. This assertion painted Christopher as someone who understood the gravity of his situation and was taking steps to evade accountability. Defense attorney Mario Gallucci aimed to frame Christopher Gregor as a responsible father, caught in a tumultuous relationship with Corey's mother, Breanna. He argued that Christopher was simply trying to care for his son amidst the ongoing hostilities. They alleged that Corey had died of natural causes, attempting to dispute the autopsy findings that pointed toward homicide. To support their claims, the defense called upon forensic pathologist Dr. Michael Baden, the former chief medical examiner for New York City. Dr. Baden testified that there was more than a 50% chance that Corey's death could be attributed to pneumonia or some other unexplained natural cause. He further suggested that Corey's blunt force injuries might have been inflicted during the aggressive CPR administered in the emergency room, where medical staff attempted to revive him for 49 minutes.
I think that Corey's cause of death has been confused because of extensive injuries caused by this CPR process. In my opinion, that the injuries are all CPR injuries. Nobody can live for more than 2 minutes with a 1.5 inch laceration of the heart. He had an 85% oxygen level, which is very low. All of us here would have about 97% or higher. And then what I also base my opinion on is the CAT scan finding of pneumonia also present. So I think altogether, the most likely cause of death was a very severe, rapid pneumonia. My opinion would be that the manner of death, for all the information that we have, is natural.
However, this assertion was countered by the prosecution's expert witness, Dr. Feingold, a pediatric infectious disease specialist at Cooper University Medical Center in Camden. Dr. Feingold testified with a reasonable degree of scientific certainty that Corey showed no signs of pneumonia or other infections in his body.
My opinion was that there was nothing available in all the discovery and the medical records that were consistent with infection causing Corey's death or even playing a role in it.
When you say nothing available, it didn't exist?
I didn't see anything that suggested infection.
And is that opinion to a medical degree of certainty?
Absolutely.
The defense also attempted to shift the narrative regarding Corey's bruises, arguing that they had only appeared after he returned from his mother's home. Over the course of the trial, they continually tried to discredit Breanna, bring up her past, and how she had relapsed a couple of times.
So in December of 2020, you relapsed again. Was
Yes.
it the same drug, the methamphetamine?
It was.
And how do you take that? Is that like something called a bump? I've heard that term.
Yeah, you snort it.
Okay,
Yeah.
you snort. So when you say the word bump, that means you're snorting a methamphetamine.
I guess.
I don't know.
Yeah,
Is that how you ingest it?
yes.
Okay. So in January of 2020, you have a drug issue, you lose custody of Corey. In March of 2020, you still don't have custody of Corey. I believe it's in October, though, of 2020 that you're now allowed visitation.
I am, yes.
Okay. And in October of 2020, you then relapse in December of 2020.
Yes.
Okay. Does Christopher know that you relapsed in December of 2020? Did you tell him?
I don't believe I did.
Okay. And did you go back to rehab?
I did not.
However, statements made to the police by Breanna's boyfriend of several years insisted that he never saw Breanna abuse Corey. A longtime family friend of Breanna's also told police that Breanna was a good mother, who he never saw hit Corey, but noted Corey told him Christopher hit him. As the trial unfolded, a significant development occurred when it was revealed that both Christopher Gregor and his mother were expected to testify in his defense. However, Christopher's attorney ultimately decided against calling either of them to the stand. This decision came after prosecutors obtained an audio recording in which Christopher was allegedly coaching his mother from his jail cell about how to testify. In May 2024, the jury found Christopher Gregor guilty of aggravated manslaughter in the death of his son Corey. Additionally, he was convicted of endangering the welfare of a child.
1. How do you find as to count 1 endangering the welfare of a child?
Guilty.
2. How do you find as to count 2 murder?
Not guilty.
3. How do you find as to the charge of aggravated manslaughter?
Guilty.
And you did not answer question 4?
No, sir.
At this time, thank you, Madam Foreperson, you can be seated. At this time, I'm going to poll the jury. Members of the jury, you've heard the verdict as read by your foreperson. At this point, I'm going to ask each juror by number, except the 2 alternates, to respond yes if the verdict read by the foreperson is your verdict, no if the verdict read by the foreperson is not your verdict. Juror number 2.
Yes.
Juror number 3 is empty. Juror number 4 is alternate. Juror number 5.
Yes.
Juror number 6.
Yes.
Juror number 7.
Yes.
Juror number 8.
Yes.
Juror number 9.
Yes.
Juror number 10.
Yes.
Juror number 11 is an alternate. Juror number 12. Juror number 13.
Christopher Gregor was initially charged with murder. However, the jury found him guilty of the lesser included offence of aggravated manslaughter. Upon the announcement of the verdict, Christopher was seen shaking his head slightly, a sign of disbelief or disapproval of the outcome. In contrast, Breanna, Corey's mother, began to cry. Outside the courthouse, Breanna said, "We're happy with the verdict, and we thank the prosecutor's office. He deserves to be in jail. He's a very bad man." Ocean County Prosecutor Bradley Bilheimer said, "At long last, justice for Corey has been accomplished. Christopher Gregor must live the rest of his life with the knowledge that he, and he alone, was responsible for the death of his one and only son. While nothing can bring this precious child back to his family, we hope that today's jury verdict offers some semblance of peace and closure for those who knew and loved Corey." Sentencing took place a few months later in August 2024. At the sentencing hearing, Judge Guy Ryan noted that he had received hundreds of letters from people around the country to weigh in on the sentence. During the hearing, emotional victim impact statements were presented by Corey's mother, Breanna, and his maternal grandparents. Breanna's statement was particularly poignant as she addressed Christopher directly, expressing her grief and the pain of losing her son.
On behalf of my son Corey, I stand here before you to plead for justice that Corey rightfully deserves, and to press for the maximum sentence of Christopher Gregor, whose actions have inflicted irreparable harm in our lives. Corey was and still is my life, my world, and my everything. I would also like to speak about my past, which I am not 100% proud of. You heard a lot about it throughout the trial, and so did a lot of the world. It was very upsetting for that to come out because I've worked extremely hard for many years to be where I am today. I admit I abused drugs, but during the trial it was made out that for some reason my son deserved to be killed because his mom was a drug addict. That is absolutely disgusting. I stand here today, clean and sober, and I know Corey would be so proud of me. Unfortunately, my son is no longer here to tell his story, so I'm here to be his voice and tell his story along with all the others sitting in the gallery who have continued to stand by me. Not once have you seen the defendant shed a tear for Corey in the last 3.5 years since he killed him, and today was fake. I don't believe a word he said, and I don't accept any apologies. He never had an ounce of love for Corey, and to the defendant, Corey was just an inconvenience in his life. He never hugged him, he never praised him, he never told him he was proud of him or that he did a good job. He punished Corey every chance that he could get, and I cannot even begin to imagine what my son dealt with behind closed doors with this man. I live in a nightmare, and I would never wish this feeling or how I must live on my worst enemy. Throughout everything he did to Corey, Corey still loved him. He looked up to you, and he still wanted to be, and he still wanted him to be like a real father who treated him like a son. Instead of being a good role model for Corey, he decided to beat him to death. Why? Were you jealous of him? Did you hate me so much that you took it out on Corey? There was no amount of love in his actions, and only a disturbing amount of hate. It seems like he hated Corey simply because I loved him. I hate you for not letting me say goodbye to my son, but I thank God your face is not the last one he saw. I hate you. I will never forgive you. He deserves nothing less than to experience the pain, suffering, and isolation that he inflicted on Corey. I hope that every moment he spends in prison is haunted by the torment of knowing he killed my child. He stole over 70 years from Corey and thousands of memories he could have made. I will never see my son again. I miss him and I love him so much. There are countless reasons Christopher deserves the maximum sentence. He rejected what I considered a generous plea deal, which shows how selfish and ignorant he is as a person. I beg you to not allow this injustice to continue, and he must face the full consequences of his actions.
Christopher, during his address to the court, maintained his denial of responsibility for Corey's death, yet he expressed remorse for the pain his actions had caused.
Breanna, we haven't talked since Corey passed away. With everything that has been said, I just want to tell you that I'm sorry that you lost Corey. He was, to say simply, the best. I know we'll miss him for the rest of our lives. And the 2 years that I knew Corey were very difficult, but they were the greatest years of my life. He was a happy, energetic, loving, radiant young boy who flourished in his life in all aspects the last year of his life. And that will be how I remember him. And Corey, wherever you are, I just want to say that I'm proud of you and everything that you did. What happened on March 20th was inexcusable. To you, Breanna, your family, and mine, I want to apologize that you had to see Corey treated that way. He never deserved it. I understand this single moment will overshadow all of the others, but it's not representative of who I am, who Corey was, and his relationship with me and him. I want to assure you that on April 2nd, I did nothing to cause Corey's passing. I didn't hurt my son. I love him and I still do. I regret not bringing him to the hospital sooner. I didn't know how sick he was. I didn't know. I just thought he was tired. And whether you believe Dr. Bodden or Dr. Andrews' version of the events, the outcome is still the same. Corey is gone. He had so much to give this world, and he still can. What we do in his memory, for his memory, things that he would want us to do, that's all we have now. I understand you have a job to do today, Your Honor. Sentence me for the crimes I've been convicted of today. I ask that you could please consider all of the evidence presented in and out of the courtroom when making your decision today. I ask you to sentence me fairly, taking into consideration my entire life, and not just based on the 12 days.
Judge Ryan, while delivering the sentence, emphasized that although the law permitted a maximum sentence of 40 years, that would likely not withstand legal appeal. Ultimately, Christopher Gregor was sentenced to serve 20 years for aggravated manslaughter and an additional 5 years for endangering the welfare of a child. The sentences were to be served consecutively, totaling 25 years in prison.
It is clear that the offenses in this matter involve cruelty to this particularly young child of tender years who was incapable of resistance. That mandates the court place heavy weight on aggravating factor 9, so it provides strong deterrent to this defendant, as well as strong deterrence to others who would commit crimes against children, particularly children of tender years such as Corey. Defendant's a big, strong individual. His family has repeatedly talked about his athletic prowess. He was not only a high school but a college football player. The pre-sentence report details his height and weight, 6'1", 220. Corey's a little boy, was a little boy, and he deserved protection from his father, not abuse from his father.
Following Christopher's sentence, Breanna spoke to the media, saying that she would never forgive him.
25 years, you wanted 40. What are you thinking right now? What went through your mind when you heard the judge hand down the sentence?
I wasn't surprised. I had a feeling it was going to be 25, just because of his criminal past, I guess, or the lack of. So I kind of knew it wasn't going to be 40, but, we were hoping for it, but 25 is okay.
You also spoke directly to him at one point.
I wasn't supposed to, but yeah, I did.
Tell us about what you said to him and what came to you in that moment.
I just wanted to tell him that I hated him. I don't forgive him. He's a monster. He wasn't loving like he pretends to be. He didn't hug Corey, didn't kiss Corey, and it made me sick to my stomach that he made it seem like he was a good father in his statement. And I just wanted everyone to know it's not true. Don't believe him.
Despite her relentless efforts, documenting injuries, taking photographs, and making over 100 reports to the New Jersey Division of Child Protection and Permanency, DCPP, her cries for help were met with indifference. She said, "I did everything. I told them. I filmed his bruises. I recorded him telling me and my sister and my mother what his father was doing." Despite reporting Christopher for abuse over 100 times, the agency that was supposed to safeguard her child dismissed her concerns and left her feeling powerless and alone. It wasn't until after Corey's tragic death that the weight of her allegations was acknowledged, but by then, it was too late.
Why, after 100 calls and an emergency desperate plea, were you denied the opportunity to keep your child alive?
I don't know if it was incompetence on DCPMP's side or they just didn't believe me, but I collected evidence. There was a video of it happening, so I honestly do not know how it was not clear as day that he was being abused. It makes no sense to me, and I don't think it ever will.
In the wake of this unimaginable tragedy, Breanna is now seeking accountability, filing a lawsuit against DCPP for their failure to protect Corey, hoping to shed light on a system that let her down.
Are you also launching civil litigation against the authorities who ignored your 100 different calls and attempts to keep that child away from him?
Absolutely. They need to be held accountable. This happens too often. I've heard other stories from other parents of the same thing, and something has to give. Something has to change. I don't know why this is allowed to happen.
At just 6 years old, Corey had a bright future ahead of him, filled with laughter, love, and the innocent joys of life. Instead, he became a victim of a cycle of violence that went unchecked, leaving his family and community grappling with an unimaginable loss. While Corey's family finally received some semblance of justice with Christopher Gregor's conviction, I do feel his sentence is nowhere near long enough. Corey's life was stolen from him, therefore his father's actions warrant a far harsher punishment, and Christopher Gregor deserves to be locked away for the rest of his life. However, I hope that Breanna and her family have some sense of closure and that they are doing okay today, and as always, rest in peace, Corey Micciolo.